Welcome to Cupid's Corner, where love stories come alive. Sit back, relax, and let the tales of romance sweep you off your feet.
Dead of winter. Juliet peered through the frosted window of the cabin, her breath fogging the glass in uneven puffs. Outside, the snow swirled in a relentless dance, driven by icy winds that moaned through the trees. The world beyond the cabin was a silent white wasteland, where the only signs of life were the shuffling, frozen forms of the undead. She shuddered at the sight of them, their limbs stiff and their faces obscured by layers of frost. "Mark," she called, her voice unsteady. "Yeah?" He emerged from the shadows of the dimly lit kitchen, wiping his hands on a frayed dish towel. The cabin was small, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the faint tang of fear. "Do you think they'll thaw out soon?" He glanced at the window, then back at her, his jaw tightening. "They're not going anywhere until spring. We're safe for now." "Safe?" Juliet's voice trembled. "We're trapped in a cabin with zombies outside and cannibals lurking nearby." "That doesn't sound safe to me." Mark stepped closer, his blue eyes piercing through the gloom. "Listen, Juliet. We need to focus on what we can control. We have food for a little while longer, and we can fortify the cabin." She nodded, though her heart raced with unease. "What if the cannibals come? They're not afraid of the dead." A dark expression crossed his face. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." For a moment, the air crackled with tension, and Juliet felt a flicker of warmth amidst the cold dread. The unspoken bond between them had grown stronger since the world had crumbled, and it terrified her. "Together," she echoed softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. As the days dragged on, Juliet and Mark settled into a routine. They scavenged what they could from the cabin, canned goods, dried fruits, and a few precious packets of instant oatmeal. They shared stories to keep the darkness at bay, laughter echoing against the walls, a fragile shield against despair. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Juliet found herself sitting on the worn couch, a blanket draped over her legs. Mark sat across from her, a flickering candle illuminating the lines of worry etched on his face. "Tell me about your life before all this," she urged, her curiosity piqued. He hesitated, then leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I was a cop in the city. It was different. I thought I was making a difference." "What made you leave?" "Too many nights spent chasing ghosts. I wanted something real." His gaze met hers, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. "Do you think we'll ever get back to that?" Mark shrugged, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Maybe. But I can't go back. Not now." Silence enveloped them, heavy and palpable. The wind howled outside, a chilling reminder of their isolation. "Mark," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we make it out of here, I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want something different." He steadied her, his expression shifting from guarded to something softer. "What do you want, Juliet?" She swallowed hard, her heart racing. "I want to be with you. If we survive this, I want to build a life with you." "Are you sure?" His voice was low, almost reverent. "Yes." In that moment, the world outside faded away, and the weight of their circumstances lifted, if only for a heartbeat. Then, like a dam breaking, they found each other's lips, the kiss igniting like a spark in the night. However, reality crashed back as a loud crash rang out, jolting them apart. Juliet's heart raced as they exchanged wide-eyed glances, the tension of the moment shattered. "What was that?" she whispered, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Stay here," Mark commanded, his voice low and steady as he moved toward the door, grabbing a makeshift weapon, a heavy iron candlestick. "No, I want to help. Juliet. Please." He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly, gesturing for her to follow. They crept through the cabin, hearts pounding in unison. The noise had come from the back, and they moved cautiously, peeking around the corner. Outside, the snow was disturbed, and a figure staggered into view, a thin, gaunt man with wild eyes. Help! Please, he cried, his voice hoarse and desperate. Mark exchanged a glance with Juliet, uncertainty flickering across his face. What do you think? He could be one of them, Mark warned. We can't take that chance. Juliet stepped closer to the door, her heart aching at the sight of the man's frail form. He looks lost. We can't just leave him to die. Juliet, he could lead them straight to us. Mark, we have to take the risk. We can't lose our humanity. After a tense moment, Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right. But we need to be careful. He opened the door just enough to let the man stumble inside, collapsing against the wall with a groan. Thank you, he gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts. I thought I was done for. Mark kept his distance, his grip on the candlestick tight. What happened? The man looked up, his eyes wild. I was with a group. They turned on me. I barely escaped. Turned? Juliet asked, her voice trembling. Cannibals. They're everywhere. You have to be careful. Mark's expression darkened. How close are they? Not far. They travel in packs. They'll do anything to survive. Juliet's stomach twisted at the thought. We need to fortify the cabin. We have to prepare. Mark nodded, his focus shifting to the task at hand. We can't let them find us. We'll work through the night. The hours passed in a blur of anxiety and adrenaline as they barricaded the windows and reinforced the door. The newcomer, whose name was Sam, assisted them, though every moment felt like a dance on the edge of danger. By dawn, exhaustion weighed heavily on their eyelids, but the sense of urgency propelled them forward. Let's take shifts, Mark suggested, his voice hoarse. We need to stay alert. Agreed, Juliet said, her heart still racing. I'll take the first watch. Mark's eyes softened as he looked at her. I'll be right here. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the cabin, Juliet settled into a chair by the window, her gaze fixed on the undulating snow. The world outside seemed eerily still, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Hey, Sam said quietly, breaking the silence. You've got guts, you know that? Juliet offered a small smile, though her heart raced. I just want to survive. Most people wouldn't have let me in, he admitted, his expression shifting from admiration to something darker. It's dangerous to show kindness now. I know, she murmured, glancing toward Mark, who had fallen asleep in a nearby chair, exhaustion etched on his face. But we can't lose who we are, not even now. As the morning dragged on, the cabin remained quiet, the storm outside a distant memory. Then, a sound shattered the stillness, a dull thud against the door. Juliet's breath caught in her throat as she exchanged a wide-eyed look with Mark. Get ready, Mark whispered, his voice low and steady. He reached for the candlestick again, gripping it tightly. Footsteps crunched outside, and a voice rang out, harsh and mocking. Open up. We know you're in there. Juliet's heart raced. It's them. Stay back, Mark hissed. Let us in. We just want to talk, the voice taunted. Juliet felt a chill crawl up her spine, the tension thickening in the air. They're lying. We can't trust them. The door rattled again, and Mark's eyes darkened. We have to hold our ground. Please, another voice cried, this one desperate. We're just hungry. Juliet's breath quickened as she felt the weight of their situation pressing down on her. What do we do? We wait, Mark replied, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. The voices outside grew louder, more insistent. We can help you. Just let us in. Juliet's heart raced as she glanced at Sam, who was pale and trembling. Mark, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What if they break in? They won't, he insisted, though his grip tightened on the candlestick. But then the door creaked, with splintering under the force of their assault. Get back! Mark shouted, stepping in front of Juliet, his body a shield against the impending threat. With a final, desperate push, the door burst open, and a group of ragged people surged inside, eyes wild with hunger and desperation. Mark swung the candlestick, catching one of them on the side of the head with a sickening thud. "Get back," he roared, adrenaline coursing through him. Juliet grabbed a nearby chair, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay away!" The chaos erupted, bodies colliding, shouts echoing in the small cabin. Juliet fought to keep her footing, her heart racing as she swung the chair at anyone who came too close. "Help!" Sam cried, struggling against two attackers. "Mark!" Juliet yelled, panic flooding her as she saw Mark grappling with a man larger than him, the struggle fierce and frantic. "Juliet, get Sam," he shouted, his voice strained. With a surge of determination, she rushed to Sam's side, swinging the chair and knocking one of the attackers back. "Get up, Sam." He scrambled to his feet, eyes wide with fear. "We can't hold them off. We have to try." "Juliet." Mark's voice cut through the chaos as he shoved the larger man away, panting heavily. "Get to the back. We need to regroup." Juliet nodded, her heart pounding as she pulled Sam with her toward the back of the cabin, where they could catch their breath. "Do you have a plan?" Sam gasped, glancing back at the fray. "Just hold on," she replied, her mind racing. Mark fought off another attacker, his fists flying, but the odds were against them. The cabin was too small, the attackers too numerous. Then, in a moment of clarity, Juliet spotted the window. "We can escape." "What about Mark?" Sam asked, panic etched on his face. "He'll follow. We have to go." With a swift motion, she pushed the window open, the cold air rushing in. "Come on." Sam scrambled through, and Juliet glanced back at Mark, who was still battling against the tide of bodies. "Mark." "Go," he shouted, his voice fierce. "I'll be right behind you." She hesitated, torn between fear and loyalty. But the sound of more voices approaching from outside drove her forward, and she climbed through the window, landing in the snow with a thud. "Juliet!" Mark shouted, the fight in his voice echoing through the chaos. "Come on," she urged, pulling Sam to his feet. The snow crunched beneath their weight as they sprinted away from the cabin, the cold biting at their exposed skin. "Where do we go?" Sam gasped, glancing back as the cabin loomed behind them, a battleground of desperation. "Up the mountain!" Juliet cried, her breath visible in the frigid air. "We have to find higher ground." They stumbled through the snow, the landscape a blur of white and gray. The wind howled, drowning out the chaos behind them, but Juliet's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to focus on survival. "Juliet!" Mark's voice rang out, desperation lacing his words. She turned, relief flooding her as she saw him burst through the window, moving with the agility of someone who had fought for his life. "Go," he yelled, determination etched on his face. He caught up to them, and together they rushed up the mountain, the snow crunching beneath their feet. "Where are we going?" Sam asked, panic in his eyes. "Anywhere but here." Juliet replied breathlessly. As they climbed higher, the trees began to thin, the world unfolding before them in a breathtaking panorama of white and gray. But the beauty was overshadowed by the urgency of their escape. They reached a small outcropping, and Mark turned to face them, his expression fierce. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves." Juliet caught her breath, her heart racing. "What if they follow us?" "They might," he admitted, his gaze scanning the surrounding area. "But we need to find supplies. We can't stay here." "Then let's move," Juliet urged, determination surging through her. They pressed on, navigating the rocky terrain, adrenaline fueling their every step. The world felt vast and empty around them, but the threat was all too real. As they reached the top of the ridge, the expanse of the valley opened up before them, a breathtaking sight marred by the reality of their situation. "Look!" Sam pointed, eyes wide. "There's a cabin down there." Mark squinted, assessing the distance. "It's worth checking out. We need shelter and supplies." Juliet nodded, her heart racing. Let's go. They made their way down the slope, the cabin coming into view. It was smaller than the one they'd left, but it looked intact, a beacon of hope in the wilderness. Stay alert, Mark warned as they approached the door. Juliet took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she pushed the door open. The interior was dark, but the air felt warmer, stagnant with the promise of safety. Is anyone here? Mark called, his voice echoing in the silence. No response. They stepped inside, and Juliet's heart raced as she scanned the room. It's empty. Good, Mark replied, moving deeper into the cabin. Let's search for supplies. They combed through the small space, finding a few cans of food, a couple of blankets, and a rusty lantern. Not much, but it's better than nothing, Mark said, his tone grim. Juliet nodded, relief flooding her. We can make this work. As they settled in for the night, the tension began to ease, though the weight of their circumstances lingered. Do you think they'll find us? Sam asked, his voice shaky. Mark shook his head. Not if we're smart about it. Juliet's heart ached as she looked at Mark, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. We'll be okay, right? He met her gaze, his eyes fierce yet soft. As long as we stick together, we will be. The night passed slowly, the wind howling outside as they huddled together, sharing warmth and stories. Juliet felt a sense of comfort in their closeness, the bond between them deepening in the face of adversity. But as dawn approached, the sound of footsteps outside shattered the fragile peace. Mark, Juliet whispered, her heart racing. He tensed, glancing toward the door. Stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, and a voice called out, rough and demanding. We know you're in there. Come out. Juliet's breath caught in her throat, panic flooding her senses. Mark moved to the door, his expression fierce. Get ready. With a swift motion, he swung the door open, revealing a group of rugged figures silhouetted against the rising sun. Looks like we found some stragglers, one of them sneered, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Get back. Mark shouted, stepping protectively in front of Juliet and Sam. Or what? Without warning, Mark lunged forward, tackling the closest figure, chaos erupting as the others rushed in. Help him. Juliet cried to Sam, her heart racing as she grabbed a nearby chair, brandishing it like a weapon. Together, they fought, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they defended their new home. Mark! Juliet shouted, fear lacing her voice as she swung the chair at one of the attackers. Keep fighting, he yelled back, his fists flying as he grappled with another assailant. The struggle felt endless, each moment stretching into eternity as they fought for their survival. Finally, with a surge of determination, they managed to push the attackers back, the chaos settling into an uneasy silence. Panting heavily, Mark turned to Juliet, his eyes fierce. Are you okay? I'm fine, she gasped, her heart racing as she took in the scene around them. The attackers scattered, retreating into the wilderness, and as the adrenaline began to fade, the reality of their situation settled in. We need to regroup, Mark said, glancing at Sam. We can't stay here. Juliet nodded, her heart heavy as they prepared to leave the cabin behind. As they stepped outside, the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. Where do we go now? Sam asked, his expression uncertain. Anywhere but here, Mark replied, determination etched in his features. Juliet felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Together. They set out across the snow, the world stretching out before them, a canvas of uncertainty and promise. With every step, they moved forward, leaving behind the shadows of their past and embracing the warmth of their newfound bond. And as the sun broke through the clouds, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The end.
Thank you for listening. Let's spread the love. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because everyone deserves a bit of romance.